Welcome back. Still with me in the studio, Thabiso Ramasike, who's the head of franchising at Standard Bank, Bendeta Gordon, director and founder of Franchize Directions, and Derek Smith, who's the chairman-elect of the Franchising Association of South Africa and also the MD of Hot Dog Cafe. Let's marry these two parties together now. Jeremy Mansfield comes along to you as chairman-elect of the Franchising Association of South Africa, and he says, "Mr. Smith, sir," because I'm a very courteous person, and I show respect to elders.
Love that.
Yeah, and I say, "I'm interested. I've got a little pot of money here, and I'm interested in becoming a franchisee." Do you start pointing me in any sort of direction? What does the Franchising Association essentially do?
The Franchising Association is a representative body of a certain sector of the franchisors. One of its basic functions is to ensure that they meet certain standards, that they comply with various code of ethics, and they behave in a certain fashion.
So I'm already on the right track. I'm talking to the right person. Correct. Because I want to have somebody on my side who, if I fall out with the franchisor, I have some form of representation as well.
We're obviously very concerned about the behaviour of our members and the way they treat their franchisees and vice versa. So in any dispute, if it comes to, we're there to mediate and to assist parties to make sure they overcome problems if they need us. You know, because in all relationships, like we all know this, there are times when things can go wrong. There is the 10% that don't succeed, and they can feel aggrieved.
Yeah.
So we're there for that. But if we just make sure people comply with the rules. If you get involved with a franchise that's outside the system, you have very little except the courts of law to appeal to and the contract. We also obviously promote our members' interest, and we try and market their products, obviously. But more importantly, we represent the industry to government, and spend a lot of time, like on the Consumer Protection Act, Competitions Act, representing the industry to make sure they're not prejudiced in those sort of areas.
Thabiso, you've brought up this A-grade franchisor and very hot franchisee. What essentially do you look at? If I walked into your office and said, "I'm interested in a franchise, and I would like to borrow some money. I'm going to gear it with some of my capital, but I'd like to borrow some." What are you guys essentially, as a bank, what are you looking for in that individual?
Yeah, I think it's very essential. I mean, to go back to what has been said already around the importance of a solid franchise system. So the track record of the franchise system is absolutely crucial. So we basically categorize franchisors by way of saying A, B, C. Right. A being sort of being the best grade there is, and C being just indicating that you have sort of a newish kind of franchisor at play. Okay. And then on the other hand, on the franchisee side, from a Standard Bank perspective, we categorize them by way of saying 1, 2, 3. So it's ABC 1, 2, 3. Your
bank is a simple guys.
Very simple. And one being your multiple store owner. Like I said earlier, multiple store owners can own from 5 up to unlimited, and we know of groups in South Africa that own 70, 80, 100 outlets. And category 3 franchisee, really it's somebody who just started in franchising. So it's so crucial that a franchisor indicate maximum support for the particular brand, and they provide a lot of support as well for the franchisee. So those kind of franchisors we would want to support as much as possible. On the other hand, we want a hungry franchisee. Just because you're going into a franchise system, you're going into something that's already operating, you need to show a lot of hunger for that particular brand. You need to show that you've got keen interest, you've done your homework, you've explored a couple of other brands before you come and you make a selection on brand X. Because what we often find, people go in and they say, "I want a particular brand," whether my DNA as a franchisee does not tie up with that particular brand, whether I will go into that brand at all costs. So we look at those two scenarios, and then of course we look at viability. And what supports viability is obviously the profile of the franchisee. On one hand, things like location, you know, where the outlet is being set up. Those mitigate, you know, whether that transaction will be a viable one or not.
What I'm starting to pick up here, and I'll throw this at you, Bendeta, being the research person, is I'm starting to get an inkling that this is really not for your sideline business.
No.
This is not a I've got my 9-to-5 job and I'll also have a franchise in a, I don't know, video outlet, pizza store, whatever. This you've got to be committed to.
Jeremy, you're 100% correct on that. I mean, 60% of the success of a particular franchise business unit is due to the operator. 40% is due to the intellectual property and the training that they're getting. So they really have to be energetic people, but over and above requiring a certain level of business acumen, they have to have a very strong respect for the franchise system. So you can't have a franchisee that kind of says, shell, the yellow, and I don't quite like it, I'm going to add a little pink into it. It doesn't work like that. You need to, as a franchisee, have the respect that it's been developed. Your compliance with the standards and the policies and procedures that have been prescribed by the franchisor is essential to ensure the strength of that brand and the perception that the consumer has of the level of service that you're going to get. So
essentially, I mean, when you're going into this business, this franchise thing, you are becoming an ambassador for the brand that has been established.
I think any brand is only as good as its weakest outlet or its weakest member, and one has to remember that.
Yeah.
So, so you want to go into a McDonald's anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, you want to get a consistency, and that is the strength of a brand. So, yeah.
I suppose that's the whole thing about brands, really, is it comes back to the old marketing adage that people don't know what they like what they know. And if you walk into, you open the door, a McDonald's, and you order a Big Mac, whether you are in Shanghai or in a shanty town, you want the same Big Mac because that's what you expect. That's your expectation of that brand. You were talking during the break, Bendeta, about franchise opportunities outside the ones that exist at the moment and growing this sector of the franchise business. And I'll come back to that point because I am gobsmacked by it, that franchising contributes 11.8% of South Africa's GDP. It's more than agriculture and manufacturing as separate sectors, which to me is absolutely astounding. Where do you see growth coming in the franchise sector?
You know, I think one of the biggest problems that we have in South Africa, it's not what I think, we all know this, is creation of jobs. And a lot of industries have been exploited in terms of the commercial franchising, and we see around the world that there's a type of franchising called social franchising, where the strong profit imperative is not as high. It's a sustainable type of business, but providing products and services that may not necessarily always be provided in a commercial private enterprise.
Like what?
So, for example, agriculture. You mentioned agriculture. We're bigger than agriculture. Small-scale farming could be done on a franchise basis, where you have a centralized franchisor. He sources the seed and the fertilizer, and he provides the expertise to small-scale farmers on small pieces of land in terms of when they should be sowing, how they should be preparing, what kind of insecticide should they be using, and also secures a market for the produce. Now, that could create a lot of jobs, it could create a lot of sustainability, and we're seeing it happening in other parts of the world.
But this is not brain surgery, and we're not reinventing the wheel here, because this already existed in the form of the sort of wheat boards, and I know my family comes from the pineapple industry, and you had at the time you had the canning factory would come around and tell you when to plant, when to pick, So we've been there and done that, haven't we? We just need to sort of make sure that we can do it properly and more effectively, which I think we can do.
Jeremy, I mean, your earlier question was, you know, where to in terms of prospects within the sector. I mean, what we find quite interestingly, every time we speak to franchisors, they're actually very buoyant about tomorrow, about the plans for growth. You know, in South Africa, I mean, major brands, you know, global brands that are located here have got massive growth plans. You know, just indicating that, you know, you spoke about that 11% odd, which you've been talking about earlier. It's that share of this pie is likely to grow. What is also interesting, what we've been observing, is that the South African firms now used, or global firms located here, used as a base into the rest of Africa. And that's the next big thing as well in franchising, you know, not just in South Africa in terms
into Africa as well,
but into the rest of it. I mean, there's about 700 brands in franchising. You know, as Bendeta, you know, is talking, you know, spoke about, you know, earlier around saying, you know, the new concepts that could be looked at. The big challenge from a banking point of view is not just establishing new concepts. It's how those are sustained, how you build the track record.
The one word that came up here, and we're fast running out of time, so I'm going to throw a last question to you, Derek. Word was buoyant. Would you say that is one of the things that you have to have in your nature as a person who wants to be a franchisee? You've got to be buoyant, you've got to be positive, you've got to run your own business.
And you've got to be hands-on, most definitely. Yeah, they're absolutely essential.
Yeah. Listen, we could carry on here for another 3 hours, I'm telling you. And I think maybe what we need to do is we may need to, in further shows, start breaking this down a bit more and looking at the different sectors which are viable options, and looking at franchising into Africa as well. So I'm sure we will be dragging you kicking and screaming out of your offices back into our studios. But thank you very much for your time. It's been a fascinating insight, and I think we've just had a very small insight